Hi, this is Bob Thompson. I'm sitting in the living room of Ella Miano, and she's going to talk about her life, I hope, and give us some interesting details about life in Ronceverte and wherever else she's been um, over the past, I don't know, 50 or 60 years. So, Ella, why don't you go ahead and what I'd be interested in starting with is your early memories, early childhood, your parents' background, things like that. So why don't you just go ahead and start?
Okay.
And if I want to direct it, I'll go ahead and do that.
This is where I was born and raised.
In this house?
This house was built in 1832 by my Foglesong lineage.
Okay.
Uh,
Focal?
Foglesong,
Spell that.
Foglesong. Very German. My father assumed that he was a Hessian soldier that came over here for the Revolutionary War, served with George Washington, was on George Washington's surveying crew, and that's how we happened to get this property. George Washington didn't have money to pay his people on his surveying crew, so he gave them land. So this is a land grant. And it was the Foglesong that built this house was the son of the Foglesong that built the Old Stone Church in Louisburg. And my grandmother was a Foglesong that married a G. And my G relatives are equally interesting.
Yeah.
They were originally from Lunenburg, Virginia, and the way they got here was Robert Pleasance his wife died, and he had several children, and he decided to go to Kentucky. So he started out, and his horse died, and his wagon broke down, and so he was looking around here for property, and he bought property over in Williamsburg and remarried. And somewhere I've got a picture of my grandfather's parents at a camp meeting, and with him on their lap. Anyway, I've got lots of pictures. And so that's pretty much the history of the house. I'm the sixth generation to live here.
Wow. And do you know what year the house was built? I think you told me.
1832. And we know that. And the kitchen was not originally attached to the house. So in 1836, they attached the kitchen and put this dining room on. And the reason we know that is there was a board in there that's got we still have the board hanging there that says 1836 was when that was done.
Someone wrote a note about it?
No, it's carved in a board.
Just that date was carved in.
So it's hanging in there.
That's interesting. So they were interested in the history of it. I mean, to put that date, they were expecting someone to look at that down the road, weren't they?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
The initials on it are WMS, and my father said that was William Speck, who was an uncle or a cousin that was here. And my grandmother, I always said, was the ultimate German. And my dad said one time, Speck was the professor at some university in Philadelphia. And one of my relatives said to my grandmother, oh, I had no idea we came from such aristocratic stock. And she said, well, I thought everybody knew. That was my grandmother. The Foglesongs were the ultimate people. They were. And a lot of them spent their summers here. My Uncle Chris, I remember vividly, her brother Chris Foglesong. And his family, they always came in the summer. And my cousin Catherine and her 3 boys always spent the summer here, although they lived in Cincinnati. But this was the home place. This is where everybody came back to.
Fun. Tell me about where you come into the picture.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, my father was an only child, and Mama's boy. She thought so. He was pretty independent, shall we say? But anyway, I said to him once, I'm surprised you didn't go to college, because he was very well read. And he said, oh, I didn't think I had sense enough to go to college until the dumbest boy in my class turned out to be the prosecuting attorney of Greenbrier County. But anyway, he played baseball on Ronceverte Reds team and was their star catcher. I think he was a catcher. No, shortstop. Shortstop.
When was that? Do you know the years or about?
Oh, well, yeah, I've got the newspaper clippings of the Ronceverte Reds.
Would that have been in the 40s, 50s?
Oh wait,
30s.
Let's see, I think Mother was 24 when they married. Daddy was born in 1900.
Okay, so it would have been in the 20s.
Mm-hmm.
That he played for the Ronceverte Reds.
Anyway, when he fell desperately in love with my mother, and they eloped, and the reason I know they eloped was because she never would have seen him married, and she never forgave them for
eloping.
For going off and getting married. And they didn't live here at first. And then when my grandfather, they farmed here, but he went blind. And so my dad and mother moved in here with my grandmother. This is where I grew up.
Was this a farm?
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I love to tell about my dad was he was a very smart man, and he fancied himself a breeder. In fact, he went to West Virginia University and took a course in breeding animals. He bred his trotting race horses, which turned out to be fine. One of them was a.
Did he keep the horses on the property?
Well, he sold them off. He wouldn't have anything but Jersey cows, and if you know anything about Jersey cows, their milk was half cream. So we had plenty of cream, and they sold milk and delivered twice a day in Ronceverte from G's Dairy. He bred a hog that he was very proud of, and she had, I think, 16 pigs.
Now, do you remember these?
No, I don't, but my mother does.
Okay.
I mean, my mother did. She said,
So these are before you were born.
oh, yeah.
Okay, good, sure.
Well, I might know. I might have been born, but I wasn't old enough
Wasn't
to know.
old enough, no.
Yeah, but he made her stay with him in the barn when that hog was having her pigs. And he gave her a rake. I love this. And every time was born, she was to rake it over because a sow would kill her piglets. And he sold those for a very large amount of money. Well, he also bred, let's see, his cows, his horses, his pig, everything. But anyway, his dog.
So he raised them all on this property,
Here. Mhm.
on this farm. Now the old building out
Oh,
there.
I still have 40 acres left.
Really?
But we owned everything from the top of the hill to town. It was all, my grandmother gave right down there where at the top of the hill, where, well, Dina lives there now, but that was my Aunt Laura's. Nanny gave her the property to build their house. The house right down here was the Houchins' house. She gave Aunt Mame the property to build her house. That little house over there was Bob and Lois Fry's. She gave Bob the property to build that house. And let's see, there was the Houchins, and Aunt Florence had a boarding house downtown. And Nanny, my grandmother was Nanny, kept her in milk, butter, eggs. We had lots of chickens. We took down to Aunt Florence's for her to serve at her boarding house. Anyway, that's what I remember growing up. I remember going to Aunt Florence's.
The boarding house.
And she gave my wedding.
Did you deliver, going to the boarding house, did you deliver the things? What was your job as a child?
You know, this yard out here, everybody on this hill played up here. And we'd have ball games and kick the tin can and all the kinds of games. And
when were you born? What was your birthday?
1929.
1929.
And, but if Daddy needed somebody to help him deliver the milk at night, he'd have me come. I didn't want to. I wanted us playing, and I didn't want to leave. And but he let me ride on the running board. He had an old Model A Ford, and I rode on the running board and delivered the milk. And for a treat, he would buy me a hot dog downtown. So I remember those days. He was a rural mail carrier, delivered the mail for over 40 years, and when he retired, they gave him his original saddlebag that he carried on horseback. And
do you still have that?
Well, my daughter, it was out here hanging in the room. She said, "Mom, I would love to have Papa's old saddlebag." So I said, she didn't want to ask him, and I said, "Well, Daddy, Melinda would like to have your old." He said, "Oh, I've been cutting it up to make soles for my shoes." Didn't waste anything.
No. Now, do you have any brothers or sisters?
No, I have one sister. I had one sister.
Was she older or younger?
Younger. Mary Ann. And
Did you remember growing up with Mary Ann? How close was she to you in age?
2 years younger. Oh, I have to tell you that story. That's one of my favorite stories. I was my daddy's girl. I was daddy's girl. And one time, my grandma Shanklin, who was not noted for her soft touch, said to me, "Well, your dad cried when you were born." Well, it just upset me so, and I cried, and it upset to my mother, and Daddy cried when I was born. She said, "Well, they were tears of relief." She said, "We lost 3 babies before you were born." He took me everywhere with him. I remember going with him on his shoulders to ball games, and I said if my mother and grandmother ever knew this, he'd have been horsewhipped. He used to take me in the pool room and sit me in one of those high chairs while he shot pool. They wouldn't have liked that. Anyway, when my sister was born, he told me that it took him 2 or 3 days to get up nerve enough to take me in to see the baby. And finally we went in, and she was in there with my mom, and he said, "Now that's your little sister." And I looked up at him and said, "Who's her daddy?" Nobody else was having him. And he was a wonderful man. You ask anybody in Ronceverte, everybody loved Mark G.
And now, what was his full name?
Oh, Mark Edward G.
Mark Edward G. Thank you.
And my mother was a Shanklin. And I don't think there's any of those still around. But when I had lunch at the country club Sunday, next to me, not my table, was a table of 10 G's. Bonnie and Jeff and Sandra and
Nice. Well, tell me more about your childhood. What do you remember? What are some of your memories from your childhood? Things you like to do, things, friends of yours. What was school like?
Well, one thing I remember, I just tell my kids this: we didn't play in the house. You wanted to play, you played outside.
Summer or winter?
In the house. Went swimming in the Greenbrier River. And Father John, remember when Father John was here? And we put a float in the parade.
Mm-hmm.
And he was on it. We were over on the island, and I looked down through. I said, "That's where I went swimming when I was growing up." He said, "Were the glaciers still in there?" Anyway, I said, "Not after I got in." So, yeah, Mother called us river rats. Yeah, my favorite summer memories are going to the river. And
where else would you walk when you were a child? Did you stay close to the farm and just go to the river, or did you go places?
You know, Louisburg was a faraway place to us.
Sure.
Even downtown. We didn't go downtown except on Saturday night. We didn't need anything. That over there where Sessions' house is, that's where our garden was. We had cows, we had milk, we had butter, we had chickens, we had eggs, we had everything out of the garden. We went to town on Saturday night and got flour and salt, sugar maybe. I do remember that, and I remember going to the drugstore, V.A. George's. Uncle Chris, my Uncle Chris, they used to come and he had a wife that we all thought was a hoot. Well, Aunt Carrie, and she was, of course, she told Uncle Chris what to do too. My cousin Mary called him one time and she said, "Well, Chris, how are you?" He said, "I don't know, wait till I ask Carrie." Anyway, she came one summer. We were down in the drugstore having drinks, and she asked for Vichy water. And they said, Vichy water. Well, Vichy water. Don't you know what Vichy water is? It was like ginger ale. But to a Cincinnati girl, it was Vichy water. Anyway, I had amusing relatives. Funny. All of them were funny.
I can't imagine they were funny.
You ask anybody in Ronceverte, Mary Houchins was a hoot. She told me one time, she said, you know, I was secretary for the American Baptist Women for 25 years, and nobody ever listened to when I read what happened, and until I said she was going to read the epistle. It was from Philippians. She said, from the 2nd chapter of Philippines. And she said, everybody heard it, nobody ever forgot it. Oh, and Jeannie said, be sure you tell. She loved my stories about Mary. Anyway, she never drove. And I looked after her and her sister. Neither one of them ever married. And Father McSweeney called both of them the unclaimed treasures. But anyway, Mary always wanted to go look at the river. She loved going over to look. So every time we went anywhere, she'd have me take her over. But we were going by there one day, and she said, just look at our beautiful Greenbrier River. Who'd ever think she could be such a bitch?
I know about that.
Yeah. And when she was in her 90s down there, she couldn't see or hear. And I'd go down and she'd have but right in front of the TV set, right, have it turned up as high as it would go. Anybody could have walked in that house, typed everything out of it. She never would have known it. Anyway, when I would go in, I was always afraid I'd Mary, she'd never hear me. So one day I tapped her on the shoulder and she jumped and I said, Mary, we have got to get you some hearing aids. She said, oh no, honey, I'm 90, I've heard it all. Yeah, she had it. Pretty much. Anyway, they babysat us, Aunt May, her mother, Aunt May, when my mother and dad were gone anywhere. And they had hardwood floors with just little drop rugs on them. She would put us on that rug and pull us all the way around the house. Couldn't wait to get down there and get pulled around on the rug. She was a funny lady too. Oh, what was she? Oh, Mary said one time that that Aunt Mame always said, talked about predestination. And one day she said to Mother, well, what is predestination? She said, well, that's what the Presbyterians believe. They believe whatever will be, whether it is or not. Let's see. I don't know any other childhood stories.
Where did you go to school?
Right here. Ronceverte Elementary.
What do you remember about school?
Well, I remember having Gracie Moore as my first grade teacher. We walked to school, of course, and walked home for lunch. Same way when I went to the high school. We walked home for lunch. And I liked school.
Were you a good student?
I was a pretty good student. But I would show Daddy my report card. He'd say, I don't care what that thing says. Did you learn anything? He didn't care what was on the report card. And he told me one time, I said, well, the teacher, you You do not need a teacher. Everything you need to know is in a book somewhere. All you have to do is read. And so I turned out to be a big reader. And so were my kids, thank goodness. Although, now I'll tell you one thing I remember about being, my son, my firstborn, I always laid down with him for his nap and read to him. And one day I was reading something, I don't even remember what it was, and he said, "Mom, what was it like when the Indians were here?" And for the first time it occurred to me that kids don't conceive of a time when you weren't there. You must have always been there. Anyway, he's a big boy now.
And you remember anything about your teen years?
Oh, yeah. Well, I had three favorite teachers in high school. One of them was Lucy Yates. And Lucy put me in all the plays. One of them was Ward Hedrick. Everybody called Mr. Hedrick Shakespeare because he could quote all kinds of Shakespeare and all kinds of He taught me to love poetry. And the other one was Sarah George, who was married to Charles George. And I remember her reading to the class when the play first came out, Our Town. She read that to the class, and I never forgot that. It was wonderful that she did. She was an excellent English teacher. And had a little group of girls that was our little corps. And was in all the plays. And the senior play I remember was A Date with Judy, and I was Judy. And so when I went, Lucy Yates is the one that got me enrolled at Concord. And my father never forgot that either, because he had no idea where the money was going to come from to send me to college. But we took a one-act play over to Concord for the competition. And while we were there, Lucy took me to the administration office and she said, "Now you need to get," and I'm like, I don't even know what's going on. And she got me a job in the dining hall to pay my tuition, but I had to start in the summer because they wouldn't hold the job for me until fall. So I graduated in May and went to Concord in June when I was 18 years old.
So did you pay your own way through college?
Yeah.
By working?
And that's where I met my husband.
Tell me about that. Tell me about that romance.
I'd love to tell you about that. Here I was, I'd not hardly been out of Greenbrier County. Green as grass, homesick, and working in the dining hall. And one of the guys that was working in the dining hall kept saying, "Well, get you a date with this friend of mine." I go, "I don't need a date. I've got a boyfriend." I did have a boyfriend who was coming over to see me regularly. And I said, "No, I don't go on blind dates. Oh, we'll just go down to the sweet shop and have a Coke." I said, "Oh," anyway, so he told me where he sat in the dining hall. So as I went back, I had a table of 20 boys in the very back, which is why I now have flat feet. And I had to pass his table as I went by, and I remember that it was a Sunday and he was dressed for church. And I thought, not too bad. Maybe
So
I
you
will.
knew it was him.
Maybe I will go have a Coke with him. So we went with Dan and his date, and me and Tony, and I didn't know him. And he told me after, he said, well, Dan said, oh, you'll like her. She's a nice, quiet girl. He said, you like to talk my leg off. Anyway, he was an ex-Marine, a senior at Concord.
Now, what year was this?
What year? 47.
Okay, so he had been overseas.
Oh my gosh, for 4 years.
Tell me what you know about his time in the service.
Well, I'll tell you one thing.
And then go back to the romance, and I want to hear all the rest of the story.
He didn't talk about it a lot, but it's that thing you saw hanging on the wall out there. Melinda, my daughter, said to me, where are Dad's medals? I said, I don't know anything about any medals. She said, well, I know he had a Purple Heart, because he was wounded on Tarawa, or Tarawa, whichever one they say. He was a machine gunner, and that's where he got hurt. He was also, I don't know, they sent him back to the hospital in Hawaii. I don't know whether it was Honolulu, in Hawaii, and then made him sergeant of the guard on a troop ship. And I met his best friend when he was in the Marines. The story he told, this was his favorite story, my kid's favorite story. When he was in the South Pacific, he got a monkey, a Zamboangan monkey. I can't remember my kids' names. I remember that was a Zamboangan monkey. He loved that monkey, and that was when he was on the troop ship. And that monkey used to ride on his pistol, gun, whatever that holster thing is. And he said he loved chewing gum. He'd always get chewing gum. And he could go down in the mess hall, and the cook, they'd give him a banana, and and he would hide, he would get on the pipes up on when the sailors would go by, he'd jerk their hats off. Well, anyway, he wrote to let me see who it was. Got a telegram back that said Sergeant Miano has permission to land one Zamboangan monkey. He had John Smith had said to him, "You want me to take the monkey home for you?" And Tony said, "No, I've already taken care of that. I've got permission to bring." Anyway, somebody told on him having the monkey, and that was the closest he came to getting court-martialed. He was told to report to the captain, and he did. The captain said about the monkeys, I don't know anything about a monkey. The next call he got was to come to the captain's office in full dress uniform, and he said, I knew then I was in big trouble. Anyway, the surgeon on the ship was there, and he said, you need to turn that monkey in. And he showed him the telegram. He said, I have permission to land that monkey. He said, well, I'm the boss on this ship. And he threw it overboard.
Oh.
Broke Tony's heart. But that's what my kids they'd get up on his lap. Tell us about your monkey, Dad.
Yeah.
And he would tell story after story about that monkey. Anyway, I'm trying to think. Anyway, as soon as he got out, he went to Concord on the GI Bill, finished in 3 years, went to summer school, went all, right through, and we met, well, Dan, when we went to have the Coke. And he started asking me out where you couldn't go out around, And he was 6 years older than me. Been around the world. What did I know?
Yeah.
Anyway, so I got to come home for a month between summer and fall when school started again. He said, well, I may come, where you live? Said, I may come and see you. And I said, I live up on Gobbler's Knob. It's the maddest I ever saw him. Tony was the type, he didn't want anybody to know his business. Anyway, he didn't know where to find me. He comes to Ronceverte. He goes, everybody, where's Gobbler's Knob? And of course, they're just dying laughing.
Tell me about Gobbler's Knob. You made
Well,
that up.
because that was just a funny thing they called that I lived up on Gobbler's Knob.
Oh, okay.
It was just, there wasn't any such thing. It was just a joke. Man, by the time he got up here and saw me, he was furious. Why in the world did I jump? And the other thing I remember about that summer is I went to the fair every night with a different guy. I was having a ball. And he came, and we went to the fair, and he was a complete dud. He didn't want to ride anything. He didn't want to do anything. And I'd been just having the best time, I thought. And years later, he had a sister my age, and we were good friends. She told me years later, and I thought, that's absolute. She said, we didn't know how to have fun. We had to be taught how to have fun. And that was true. When they grew up, they did not have any fun.
Where did he grow up?
McDowell County. Dad was a miner. All his brothers were miners. And Tony joined the Marines right after he graduated. So he never worked in the mines, but all the other boys did. No, his younger brother didn't. Zuli never did. Can you imagine a Greenbrier County farm girl and a coal miner's son from McDowell County who'd been in the Marines for 4 years? I told my kids, don't tell me your marriage is in trouble. If your dad and I could make it, anybody can make it. And the reason we made it is he was still the sergeant, and he told us how, he said one time, this is not a democracy. Let's not forget who's the king here. I give the orders. He told me, I bring home the bacon, you cook it.
Is he Italian? Miano, is that Italian?
Oh, my, yes. Oh, my, yes. Oh, yeah. He didn't speak English when he started school. And I'll have to tell, now this story I'm not proud of, but it's true. My grandmother would never come out to meet him. The weekend, either the weekend we got married or the weekend before, he was here, and I went in her bedroom and I said, Nanny, won't you at least come out and speak to Tony? And she said, well, does he speak English? I said, yes, he's a college graduate. I think you can understand him. Oh, it upset her no end that not only did I marry an Italian, I married a Catholic. And that was really bad. And I remember when we told Mother, now Tony talked to Daddy about us getting married. And I said, well, what did he say? And he said, Suella's always been very mature for her age. I assume she knows what she's doing.
Your father said that?
My mother said, I will never see you married in the Catholic Church.
So where did you get married?
In the Catholic Church.
Did she see you?
And she did it in good grace. I was so proud because she just did it. And, you know, when I look back, not at the time, I was just interested in getting married. When I look back on that and I think, you know, my parents made all kinds of, I don't know, gestures that were sweet and good that I didn't even know at the time. Yeah, they were mighty good people. Mighty good people.
So keep telling your story. Keep telling your story.
Oh, where was I?
I don't know. You got married in the Catholic Church, and your mom and dad came.
And I graduated in 47, got married in 48, had a baby in 49.
Tell me about your baby.
Well, that was kind of strange because I had been to the doctor who told me I would never have it, I would never conceive. So when I got pregnant, nobody knew what it was. Yeah, he was born in Winchester, Virginia. Tony established the health department there.
So that's where you lived at that
That's
time?
where we went to housekeeping, bought a house.
In Winchester.
And then he got word that he had a year left on his GI Bill. If he didn't take it by a certain time, he was going to lose it. He told my dad said, well, you'd be crazy not to take that. Why? He said, I'm married, I've got a baby, I got a house. Daddy said, I don't know, you do rent the house, put the stuff in storage, bring Sue Ellen and the baby home, I'll keep them. You go on to school. He went to University of Michigan, got his master's. And I remember saying to him, oh, this would be a good time to have another baby. He said, are you kidding? We don't have any money. We don't have any insurance. We don't have any. I was pregnant. Oh, it was an interesting life. So when he graduated up there, they'd already offered him a job before he got out of school.
Where did he get offered a job?
In Michigan.
Michigan.
So he wrote me and said, we're going to Michigan. And we did. I told somebody once, I said, well, where I made my biggest mistake, I raised 3 Yankees. And Mary said to me, you bring those kids home with the Yankee twang, we're going to disinherit you.
So tell me about your life there.
In Michigan?
Yeah.
Interesting. Extremely interesting. We did a lot of Tony belonged to an Optimist Club, which is similar to Rotary and Lions. Optimist, friend of the boy, was their motto. And I loved that was a nice bunch of guys. And I met people. We went to something one night, the guy that did all the news on Detroit television, I met him, and he was a charming guy. And let's see, I was always like, oh, we went to the mayor's parties on the top of the Paunch. And I belonged to St. Benedict's, well, we belonged to St. Benedict's Church. And that church was huge. And it was in a neighborhood where the people were getting older and leaving. And anyway, They had they had mass in the basement, or didn't call it the basement, but upstairs. And anyway, when it wasn't that they didn't have that many people, they weren't doing that anymore. We turned the basement of that church into a flea market, and we would once a month we'd make a couple $1,000. And we had a priest I loved, Father David. Oh, that man was a saint before he ever left this earth. He was a dear man. But anyway, we had those things over at the church all the time. We had a school, and those women used to talk me into doing things I never thought I'd do. Anyway, that's what I remember about really good friends I had there. Really, really super good friends that I had. When I came back here, they'd come down to see me.
How long did you live in Michigan?
40 years.
40. So from 50 to 90?
No, I came back. No. Well, let's see. When did we move to? Anyway, I came back here in the early 84. When we came back here, I remember I said to Tony one time, "We've never been to the UP. That's what they call Upper Peninsula."
Sure.
And he said, "Well, it's the same distance there it is home. You want?" So anyway, we finally went to the UP, which is a whole different world up there. But it's we did that. We went to Mackinac Island, which I loved.
How many kids did you have?
I have 3. I have a boy and 2 girls.
And you grew up in Michigan.
Yep, that's where they all are.
That's where they are now too? That's where they are living now?
Oh, yeah. I said to Kathy once, she's my school teacher, I said, "I wish you all would move closer. Well, if you think I'm going to teach the pay that West Virginia's getting, you crazy." Well, she was getting good pay, and she got a great pension. And so did, David worked for, I don't remember the name of it now, but he took early retirement. Anyway, so they're good to come and see me real often, and they're coming June, which is right around the corner. And David does all kinds of stuff for me when he's here. And Melinda her husband is a doctor of geology. And they've lived everywhere there's rocks. They lived a long time in Billings, Montana, which I didn't like. And they lived in Colorado. And Melinda has always volunteered for something where she lived when they moved to Colorado, she volunteered for CASA, and she had to have a background check, police background check. And she called me and she said, "Do you have all the addresses of everywhere I've lived?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am. It takes up 2 pages of my address book. But I've got them all." That's how many times they've moved.
So you moved to several locations in Michigan.
Well, no, they moved out west. They moved
Right.
Colorado, Montana. They're back in Michigan now.
Okay. All right, let's take a pause for a couple of minutes.
Oh, please.
Let's get a drink of water, and then we'll continue. Now we're in the front hall of the house, and Sue Ella's going to show us some photographs on the wall.
That's my grandmother and grandfather G. That's their wedding picture.
Let me get a better look without so much glare. And where were they married?
As far as I know, right here.
And who's this?
That's my daddy. I think he was 3 or 4 when that was taken. Me and my sister.
Sure. Cuties.
That was Christmas 1918. That's my grandmother and grandfather G. There's my dad. He was 18 years old. There's Mary and Margaret Houchins, Aunt Florence, Aunt Mame, Uncle Donald, Aunt Laura, and Uncle Tom. And I think that's David.
All right. And down here.
Well, as far as I know, that's Aunt Sarah.
Who's Aunt Sarah? How is she related?
She was Nanny's sister. Nanny, my grandmother.
Okay. You said she was a sister of hers?
Of Nanny.
Nanny, okay, of Nanny.
And I think that's Uncle Frank. That was a brother.
And you're not sure who the little girl
I
is?
don't know who the little girl is.
All right. Nice pictures. They're very modern looking faces. Aren't they? Correct, very nice. That's great. Okay, we're going to finish with a couple of more pictures.
That's my grandmother.
This is
G.
your grandmother. I like the look on her face.
When she was a Foglesong.
She looks like she's not sure about this camera thing. All right.
And that's my mother.
This is your mother?
No, that's my sister. This is my mother taken the day of the house tour.
Yeah, the gazebo.
In 1862.
How about 1962?
1962, when Ronceverte was celebrating their centennial. We had a house tour. Now, my Uncle Will Foglesong painted that. This is where all the memories are. This is the Foglesong home.
Since 1840.
1832.
1832. All right, we're going. This is the old Foglesong house. And this is a board that was found when they, I guess somebody was repainting or redoing something, and they
No,
found.
cut this. They cut this. They connected this to the rest of the house, and the board was.
So that was. Wow.
Well, it's 1869. I was wrong about
1869.
the date. 1869.
So that's when they connected the kitchen
to the
to the
rest
house.
of the house. Uh-huh.
So 1832 to 1869. So this was the kitchen, though, but it wasn't connected. This is the old kitchen. Got some plaster on the walls and things like that. Yeah, I love it.
Well, it's had a lot of work done to it since then.
I bet. I imagine so.
A lot of work.
So, Sue Ella, say goodbye to everyone.
Bye bye.